Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This week, we're doing a look back at some of the episodes from the past year that I was quite proud of that you might have missed, and I wanted to make sure you had the benefit of a highlight from each episode. Each one of the 8 segments I pulled together also features a mentor who has helped founders from the Techstars Accelerator that I lead. So as well as a highlight reel, this is a big thank you to Mai Santamaria, Patrick Pinschmidt, Hesus Inoma, Rita Martins, Alejandro Gutierrez, Laura Walsh, Philipp Pieper, Timo Lehes, and Arabian Prince from NWA. A number of the featured guests from this episode will also be out at the Techstars and Crypto Mondays Ireland event that Hugh McGurr and I are hosting in Dublin on Monday, March 10th at Toner's Pub. That night, we'll bring together the Web2 and Web3 communities in Ireland to reconnect with old friends, meet new like-minded builders, investors, and operators across Web2, Web3, enterprise, and beyond. You'll hear from our Techstars Web3 class of 2025 and maybe even kick back to enjoy a pint of Guinness. If you're in Ireland right now or you're planning to be here for St. Patrick's Week, there's a link to the Luma page to register in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie. In those very same show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie are links to all of the episodes we're featuring in this look back, so check out the show notes and click back into each episode for a full listen if you are so inclined. And now, on with the show. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Starting us off is a segment from episode 241 that Mai Santamaria and I did where we ended up riffing on the societal role in AI, totally unexpectedly. And this was one of the most thought-provoking conversations I had in all of 2023. Speaking of notable names, there was one of the biggest ones in crypto, Vitalik Buterin.
Yes.
Yesterday published his manifesto, and CoinDesk did a nice summary of that with an opinion piece.
Yes.
Okay. So just to put this in a nutshell, I had a quick look at the first couple of paragraphs of Vitalik's very, very long manifesto. It's
very long.
Yeah. Like, would be 20, 25 pages if you were to print the whole thing out. But what the picture he paints, and I'll see if I can do this through spoken word, is that there's an anti-technology view, and it is a small child on a path looking at dystopia ahead of him or her on that path. And that it's the anti-technology view, safety behind us, dystopia ahead, right? That is the anti-technology view. The accelerationist view is that dangers are behind, and it is, again, the small child on the path with a big, angry-looking bear behind that child. And then utopia ahead, a lovely, huge castle with big, bright lights over it. That's the accelerationist view. My view, or Vitalik's view, dangers behind, but multiple paths forward ahead, some good, some bad. So the child is on the path. The scary bear is behind the child. But to the left, you see the big glowing castle with the big bright lights behind it. And on the right, you see the dystopian view of a dark sky with lightning striking that dark, just ramshackle looking castle. He's saying, listen, we have an opportunity here. Technology acceleration and the decentralization of technology is something that could lead us down a path of, hey, this is where the world needs to go. This is leading us towards a good place, or it could lead us towards a bad place. I haven't yet dug into the whole thing. I probably will at some point over the next week or so. But what were some of your initial thoughts in hearing about this manifesto, Mai?
Yeah, listen, I signed up to CoinDesk, back in 2017, back to the point of newsletter. The article came in as it's 28th, so it was super fresh late last night. I read it. I haven't read the manifesto in full, but I was just going through it. It was quite long. Maybe my view of it, Scary Smart by Mo Gaudat, I recommend it. I highly recommend it, I have to say. I heard him speak at the Diary of a CEO, and he mentioned Scary Smart. I was like, hold on a second, this is about AI, and I need to pick it up, I need to read it. So heavily influenced about what I've been reading about AI and where humanity is, and particularly where we are when it comes to technology development. When I first read the article about Manifesto, my first reaction probably was, he's totally missing the point because he's missing AI.
So true.
Yeah. So, and I know I think he barely touches upon it. And I haven't finished the book. I have to say, I'm just like 3/4 through Scary Smart, and has really influenced, and I think not dampened, but I think has given me a realistic view of where I am with my thinking with technology and how it evolves.
Okay.
And to the point of the child piece, I think this is quite interesting. And I said, it's like, listen, it's easy going, like Mo writes in a very, very easy way, and it's not great. You might not agree with everything, but knowing to spend 10 years, managing Google X, I think he definitely knows what he's talking about. But when you consider that in the next 5 years, call it 10 at a max push, AI will be, say, 1 billion times more intelligent than all of humankind together.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. And then considering the manifesto when it comes to technology, what technology are we talking about? What technology are we talking about when at the very near, and this is now, as Mo describes it, this is the point of no return. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. We have created AI. AI is evolving. And it is very interesting. And the manifesto reminded me so much of that, of Scary Smart, because clearly he equates AI to a child. And that's why it's very easy for me to understand and to be able to also explain it, which is you need to think about AI where we are today as that child, say, 6 to 8 years old, and you're teaching them. And that's how we've actually taught this artificial intelligence at the moment, right? We give them something, they go and figure it out. The perfect example of it, the little box with the square triangle and, round pegs, and the child picks it up and kind of, figures out which one of the holes it goes to, which one is going to fit in. That's how AI has evolved. It takes the data, trial and error, looks for those, patterns, historical, and it learns from that. So currently where we are with AI models is that child of, say, 6 to 8 years old, and maybe a bit earlier. And what we're doing is we're fitting them information. And the information, the equivalent to this box that we have with around the square and triangle pegs, is all the data that's online. So if that data is what we currently are given from a humankind perspective, negativity, blowing up, wars, terrorism, and so forth, that's what that child is going to learn to be the norm.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at those 3 pictures in the manifesto that Vitalik put up of the child on the path. And I was looking at that from the perspective that the child on the path was society and humanity. But is that child on the path AI?
Yeah. To me, it was just like, that's great. But if we are surpassed by AI, it doesn't matter, because it will be technology deciding the future technology. So are we point in time in the future, that singularity event, because we really won't be able to predict, to get to the point that AI is clearly more intelligent than us. How technology evolves, that future path, that castle will not be up to us. Whether that castle is bright or has light or is darker, it will totally not be up to us. It will totally be up to the AI and what AI decides to do.
And now let's move on to episode 248, which we knitted together with the insights that my long-lost original co-host, Owen Fitzgerald, and I riffed on about deal flow and repetition in venture capital, combined with a conversation with Patrick Pinschmidt from Middle Game Ventures on some similar themes. Yeah, and that was one of the big lessons learned that Owen and I talked through when he asked me about what I thought from the first 1,000 deals that I've looked at through Techstars. And it was investors invest in lines, not dots. And like you said, have as many engagements, interactions as you can with people, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely right. And you'll never regret taking another meeting in a startup you're interested in, because you always learn something more. And it's not just the founder and the CEO. It's who does that person surround him or herself with? What's the quality of the other team? What's the interaction like? And it's a learning journey. I mean, we're not trying to torture people, but you do need to invest the time. And it's the founder needs to invest the time also, because when a seed investor comes on, I mean, that's generally going to be kind of a long relationship, and there'll be many twists and turns. And There'll probably be, hopefully good times, but there'll be some uncomfortable conversations and some difficult choices along the road. Ideally, if you're in a position where you can pick your investors, it's important that the startup does that due diligence also, because, while capital is capital and that's important, you also want a strategic capital to help, really be a partner as the founder grows the business.
Yeah, definitely. And what you just said there is critically important. Pick your investors, right? And that, what I say to founders is you need to go out and do the research on your market with the same degree of voraciousness as the craziest salesperson you've ever met researches their target customers. You need to understand investors, and you need to understand, is it, do they even invest in my stage? Are they writing the check size? Are they investing in this thematic that I'm involved with? And there's so many things that go into this that a lot of founders, sometimes when they're new to fundraising, they think, well, oh, they must not like me. They must not like me at all. And usually, as from an investor perspective, it's me, it's not you. And that you've got investors behind you, right? That you've signed up and that they've agreed to certain covenants and requirements and terms and so on and so forth, that when you talked about the check size and what rounds you're going to invest in, that's because you've made some representations to investors, right?
Yeah. So going through your first funding round can be quite painful and an emotional experience for all parties involved, because the lawyers tend to take over. And, obviously, key goal of both parties is to kind of limit the pain and time and money that's spent on that process. But that is table stakes for taking institutional money, and I think that's the first question the founder should ask him or herself is, do I need venture capital? Because there are frankly a lot cheaper ways to fund your business and a lot less dilutive, and some businesses that may not be the right choice, and that's kind of like that threshold question. And the other thing is, don't necessarily wait till you need capital to start talking to investors. And I think there are a lot of founders out there, and I think VCs are just as guilty of this, is waiting until a startup is in the market and then the outbound and the inbound. I think the most valuable thing is having a conversation with a founder a year before they're raising capital. And not to give away kind of our secrets, is you get a lot from that conversation. You understand, you kind of develop a compass in terms of what they're trying to do with the business. And you have a much more productive follow-up conversation, whether that's 6 months later or 12 months later. And you kind of have your check marks and your map to kind of gauge that conversation with. And Pete, I'm actually reminded of back in the pre-COVID days when I was over here. I think you introduced me to a great founder, David Heath, the CEO of Circuit. And I guess it was 2018 or 2019. It's probably 2019. I met with him, and obviously Circuit, very impressive in terms of what they're creating, a confirmation platform for the audit space, and much more now today. But, frankly, it was very early days, and, I didn't necessarily understand or appreciate the market opportunity, we didn't invest at that stage. But he came back and we talked, a year ago, and, he executed on everything he said he would 3 years prior. And then some. And, it made it a very easy decision to decide to, co-lead the Series A when that hit the market early last year, because we kind of had that reference point from 2-3 years prior. And again, this is somewhat of an extreme example because there was a 3-year gap between conversations. But again, it's just getting in the conversation. And if nothing else, be selfish about that. Obviously, the VC is being selfish in the sense of wanting to know you and quote unquote, develop a cheat sheet for follow-up conversations. But the startup founder should be selfish too, in terms of testing the VCs, getting a sense for, what they can do in terms of introductions, what can they do in terms of help, and getting your pitch together.
Next up is a segment from an episode of Venture with Hesus that I did way back in 2023 that we also published as episode 257, titled How I Got to Techstars on a Flywheel. In this segment, Hesus and I riff on the qualities to look for in founders before considering an investment in their business.
And I would like to understand now what you look at in operators, Pete, right? So when you really select an operators, what are some characteristics that you like to, see that you can define, okay, this person actually can go and rationalize all the stages and potentially succeed, right?
I mean, my favorite kind of people are those that don't lie. Okay.
Yeah, you have to be direct. Like it's a hard journey. Just say it as it is.
It's there's a lot of leftover fluff from the last bull run of people just thinking, hey, someone's going to throw money at me at some point. All I got to do is just keep speaking the bullshit, whatever. Right.
Mm.
So looking at founders, I always look at them through the same lens, regardless of whatever their proposition is.
Mm.
Are they a good person? Can you find some reference points for that in the way they talk, the way they make eye contact with you or not, the way that they may, and obviously, there are some folks that generally do not like to make eye contact because of just their own chemistry. And that is something that you have to be aware of, because that can be a positive or can be something that you would not want to see. There's lots of little mechanics there for figuring out if someone is a good person or not. Obviously, the best thing to do is talk to someone who knows them. And you can do that through a LinkedIn profile. It's easy enough. But are they experienced? Do they have deep firsthand experience of the problem they're solving? Are they ambitious? Do we have evidence of them going through brick walls? Do they have a big vision here? What is it that motivates them? Is it money, or is it just they have got this killer idea inside of them that they just really need to solve a problem? They really need to solve this specific problem because it's been eating away at them for so long. And can you get to the bottom of that? What else are they involved in? LinkedIn profile gives away so much. If you see a CEO, founder of an early stage startup that you really like, but you go on the LinkedIn profile and you see they're doing 5 or 6 other companies, it's like, they're not going to focus. What's their academic background? Had that been something where it was perhaps too much academic and that not enough true business experience? Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not good. You may have a very incredibly smart, intelligent, driven person that just may not be able to get customers on board. And they will get there. It's just they're going to need a lot of coaching. So it's always team first. Who are their co-founders? How many are there? That's another big thing. Ideally, it's around 2 or 3 co-founders at max when you're at the earliest stages, but sometimes there are more, and that can be okay, or it might not be okay. And what are those relationships like with the co-founders? Have they worked together before? Can you notice any static between them? Zoom is great for that because they think you're looking at one founder, but you're looking at the other founder while the other one talks.
Yes.
And you can see their facial reactions to all that and how they feel about what that person is saying. And if they roll their eyes, that's a dead giveaway. If they talk over each other, or if and it's like where one person starts talking and someone else doesn't like it and they take over and just don't even say, oh, can I actually address this? Do you mind if I address this? It's just, they just start talking over them. That's not a good sign. So we test for all of these things, and the homework is always a good way to do it. If you give them an assignment and see how quickly they come back and have they done it right. There's founders still that I know incredibly well that some of the most basic stuff they don't have down yet. And are they good listeners? Are they actually going to pay attention to what you say? Because that's the worst thing when you spend so much time, when you spend 13 weeks in an accelerator program, trying to share this knowledge with founders, either yourself or through others in your network that you bring in as mentors. And then you have people that don't listen. It's like, why did I even waste my time back 13 weeks ago having you in the room with me if you weren't going to listen? People get distracted. They miss things. That's fine. Other situations come up, but you can really tell the difference between those that pay attention and those that don't. Now, we've got Rita Martins, author of Web3 and Financial Services, who was on episode 264 with me last June. She and I talked about the key messages in her book and how the old world and the new world of finance are colliding. And some of these first steps that we saw back in 2017, 2018, it just feels different this time. I think it is. But with some of the key messages that are part of your book here, and that it's right there in the tagline underneath the title, is that blockchain, digital assets, and crypto disrupting traditional finance. What would you like readers to take away from this?
Nowadays, there are so many different technologies, right? I mean, AI, just everywhere, everyone is talking about AI. So if you are working, for example, at a traditional finance company, you might be wondering, why should I even look at blockchain technology? It's been a long time, and some of them haven't really seen any big changes. But the reality is that the technology has been evolving, has been changing. And it's now really being adopted by some of the big players within financial services, which will bring some of the liquidity that we might have been lacking before. And so for any leaders within traditional finance who might be wondering, why should I pay attention to these? The reality is that if you don't pay attention, you might be disrupted by some of these big companies. And so that's one of the key messages of the book is, look, it's almost like a back-end technology. I compare it sometimes to clouds. And so it takes a long time. It's also super disruptive technology because the ecosystem came as almost disrupting some of the social norms, some of the even what we think of money. It even questioned, do we even need central banks? It started with this really big vision, and I think it has evolved since, and that's why it's taking so long, because it touches money, it touches central banks, it touches some of the traditional governance models. So it's a really big ask, and that's why it's taking a long time, and it will take a long time. But if we are not ready as traditional finance leaders, you might get disrupted very quickly when other companies are really adopting some of the technology and they're going for it. So that's one of the key messages of the book, is that it is coming, and some of the big companies are really going for it now. They're really implementing some of the big solutions. And these are just building blocks, as I like to call it. So you mentioned Franklin Templeton, for example. They have their tokenized funds, and they recently, I don't know if you saw, they also just enabling USDC, the stable coin, on their tokenized funds. So until recently, crypto people could only use fiat currency. And now we say, okay, we have tokenization as a use case, but also we have new payment forms as on top of the tokenization use case. And I think this is when everyone is going to start seeing a big impact here, is when you start seeing some of these solutions with different building blocks coming together, and the ecosystem really start having some of the liquidity. And the other key, let's say, message of the book is that these worlds, the DeFi world and the traditional fi worlds, they're going to converge together. And eventually you're going to have so many new solutions that as a end user or as a client, you're not even going to know if using blockchain or not, because it's going to be super seamless. And it's just going to be another component as part of financial services.
Yeah, it's maddening, but in a good way. And there was this episode of Seinfeld back in the 90s, and I'm dating myself here, but George Costanza, one of the characters on the book, that he was worried about his social life with his friends and his life with his new girlfriend were starting to come together, and that his friends were hanging out with his girlfriend and having a good time. He's like, no, my worlds are colliding. My worlds are colliding. For so long, there had been this separation of those that were kind of, seems like part of, I wouldn't call it a crowd, but at least in my professional community, it seems like there was this financial services crowd and they did their own thing. And there was this blockchain crypto crowd and they kind of did their own thing. And now the worlds are colliding. They have collided. It's just, where are we in that Venn diagram, really, of these two globes colliding? And it's, I think you nailed it when you said the word liquidity, because there's so much new liquidity coming into the crypto markets now, with this ability to transfer between, like you said, USDC. So from fiat currency into USDC, into stable coins, and then from there into the broader crypto asset market. And one of the other Techstars mentors, Gray Webb, shout out to Gray. He's a COO and CTO of a fund called Liquibit. And they just opened up a BTC share class. And so that they had been running a market neutral arbitrage fund in crypto. And now they are enabling those that are long-term holders of Bitcoin to be able to subscribe to the fund and invest in the fund using BTC, and then basically generating returns on top of that for whatever they hold long-term. So there's plenty happening here. And it's fantastic that you're pulling all this together into a book to put in front of the crowd that we need to really bring further along on this journey, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. You can see this convergence as well by the talent that you have in it. So both of us, we came from traditional backgrounds, and we're now within the blockchain world, let's say. And I have met so many people as part of the book research and conversations that I had for the book that you can really see the talents from people who were part of the traditional finance, who have really tried and tested, who have seen things that work and don't work coming and using some of the blockchain technology. And you have seen as well from the other side, people that started probably from this blockchain vision without having too much financial background, now starting to learn much more about regulation. What does it mean if MiCA comes through and eventually, let's say, the European regulators start looking into DeFi and they start really regulating DeFi part of it. So you see a lot of this talent as well merging and learning from each other, which is super interesting.
Next up is Alejandro Gutierrez, who's done a few episodes with me recently. And this segment is from episode 269, where we had a bit of an excited exchange on stablecoins, the killer app for crypto. We're bringing trusted names.
Correct.
You know, that the U.S. Treasury bills and BlackRock and Fidelity and PayPal and you name it. And
all of that there. So I think the interesting piece in here, what is going to happen when interest rates are going lower, that the market is starting draining out. Why? What is the playing there? Just moving those funds into the liquidity pools and the credit pools for lending purposes.
Like, I know. And even things as simple as USDC, which you can get 4 to 5% on right now in yield.
Correct.
The USD Circle stablecoin. And I had generated some liquidity, shall I say, to pay for some new bathrooms in my house.
Yes.
And it's taking longer than I thought it would to get that all set up. And so that was just sitting there in cash. And I'm like, I'm going to dump it all into USDC just for 6 months. But you're right. What's going to happen when interest rates start getting cut? That these little yield opportunities are going to go away.
Well, it's going to be the appetite of people for that. And the appetite of the big organizations that are kind of backing these developments. Where are they going to move next?
They will.
But I don't know if you saw yesterday, and there was a really important announcement by USDC that they are now native on Brazil and Mexico.
They are.
Yeah, they are.
I missed that.
Yes. Check it. It's a big one because those two countries only 360 million people, more or less. And they are fully integrated actually into the systems from the government.
Holy shit.
Mixil and Semi-Mexico. It is massive. This is huge.
Okay. I'm looking at this. Using Brazil's PIX, PIX, which I've talked about on this podcast.
It is
before.
amazing. It's a different level, that thing. Huh?
That's going back a ways. And I remember, I think it might have been Facebook were shut down. No, WhatsApp payments were shut down because in Brazil, because PIX was going to be getting off the ground, and the authorities in Brazil were like, no, we need to give this thing a chance before we let WhatsApp payments come in.
Yeah.
But now, and this quote says from this Altcoin Buzz article, in a nutshell, companies can now get USDC right from their own country's currency.
Correct. So it's native. That's massive. That's huge. So you can just now suddenly get these in reais and in Mexican pesos.
Wow. Okay. All right. No, that's big. And this is going to be captured. There was the Castle Island Ventures recently put out their most recent stablecoin paper, which was looking at emerging markets. And they put this out just last week, I think.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have captured this news in that. I was about to read it this morning, but I'm going to go back and check it out.
It's really good paper. Really good.
All right. Yeah, that's big. I mean, one of the original real world asset tokenization stories is the US dollar.
Yeah.
That is a real world asset. It has been tokenized. It's been tokenized for a long time. And so many folks just don't know that these things even exist.
Yeah. Right. In those countries, right? Like an opportunity. It is not an easy task, right? Convert dollars. It is difficult. So this will open all sorts of opportunities for people and normal people as well.
Definitely. That is exciting. Laura Walsh has also been an excellent guest co-host a few times over the past year or so. And in episode 266, she and I unpacked Trump's crypto campaign promises. And amidst all of the fervor, we found something to agree on with a declaration that there would be no central bank digital currency for the US dollar on Trump's watch. Here's what we said back in August. Finally, 2 more left.
There's two more. I know there's one that I completely agree with.
The next one, no CBDC or central bank digital currency. So Trump effectively said, not on my watch, with the rhetoric on the surveillance ability, if that's a word, that a CBDC would deliver to the U.S. government. Yep. And that even if the U.S. did go there, in my opinion, it wouldn't happen in 4 years. So by default, that it would look like something that he said wasn't going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen anyway. I think the bigger issue is how do you retain and build on dollar dominance around the world? I think doing so with things such as stablecoins are going to be a hell of a lot more effective than anything having to do with a U.S. issued central bank digital currency, with probably tons of restrictions programmed in on who can hold and where and what and when and the type of wallet and all those kinds of stuff.
Yeah, no, CBDCs, I'm very anti. I've not wavered from that just because, and I never thought I would say this in my entire life. I absolutely agree with what you said about the surveillance capabilities.
Well, keep in mind, he started banging on about CBDCs a while ago, right?
He did, yeah.
And said, we're not doing it. And it's the whole, not kowtowing, but saying that to anybody who says, listen, I don't want the U.S. government looking over my shoulder. Okay. Yeah. I don't want them knowing my business. I don't want them knowing what I'm doing and where I'm spending my money. And if there's a central bank issued digital currency, then they could expectedly have this ability to do the surveillance to see who's spending what.
Banks already do this. Remember the issue we had with the ESG? Not debacle, but they're denying financial instruments to people based on their ESG score, which is, I don't know, that's borderline dystopian to me. Are you absolutely kidding? So your purchases are already being monitored, obviously, through your bank or whatever else you use, your credit card company. They're already being monitored. A CBDC is, some could argue, it's just the next logical step. However, if you just extrapolate from that, not going on a slippery slope or rabbit hole, but literally, this is already happening in some other countries where they're like, no, we don't. We want to restrict the purchase of certain things. Say we want to restrict alcohol and tobacco sales. So you can't use your CBDC for that. Or you've bought it 5 times in the past week. And so, naughty, we're going to restrict that. My own government has frozen people's bank accounts for donating to unsavory political. I would say political, but I don't think it's political. I think it's just anarchist in a way. I don't agree with their premise, but I also don't agree with cutting off people's access to their own funds. I think that was a step too far. And again, I'm not a conservative supporter, but I don't support cutting off people's access to their money. And in the US, people I know I can't pay my rent in one payment because my financial institution limits the amount of money I can send at one given time. So I can't pay my rent in one go.
Yep.
With whatever app you're using, Zelle or Cash App, or what's the other one?
Venmo.
We don't have any Venmo. Yeah, we don't have them up here, so I can't use them anyway, but I know about them. And I have Interact, which is so antiquated. You can send money through emails, basically, through your bank. But the limit there is $3,000. And you want to buy a car.
Wow.
You can't buy a car. I can't buy a car. I have to go get a cashier's check or something. Or if I have to do a wire transfer, and maybe it'll clear in 5. This is ridiculous. In one way, I'd say Thailand is ahead of you, where I can just scan a QR code with my phone and instantly send money, no problem. And my limit, I think I can personally set my limit up to 5 million baht, which is like 30, 60, maybe $200,000. There you go.
Okay.
Buy. There's new restrictions and whatnot coming in now where anything over 50,000 baht, which is a little under $2,000. They're, what are you doing? And we want your retinal scan now.
Yeah.
God. Okay. Yeah. So it's coming everywhere, but that's to get in line with the US. And I don't know how many times I've had to tell them, I am not American. You don't have to report my bank account to the United States. I have no connection with it whatsoever. But
to the untrained ear, you sound like you might be. So.
Yeah, I know.
But I can hear the good old Canadian accent coming back on full.
It's coming in a little bit. Yeah. Coming in a little bit. I haven't gone home though, so the accent's not fully out. And I'll start sounding like I'm from Cork or something.
And for our Money Never Sleeps super fans who know that more than 200 of our episodes have been named after rap songs, how could I not package up the story of the RWA or Real World Assets cap that I got from Katie Evans from the real world asset platform Swarm? and then had their co-founders Timo Lehes and Philipp Pieper on episode 277 late last year to tell the origin story of that very same RWA cap with lettering that is very reminiscent of the font used by Rock and Roll Hall of Fame rap legends NWA. Speaking of the acronym, RWA, and that is the reason why we're here today and chatting. And a big shout out to Katie Evans. I met Katie at Zebu Live in London last month, Web3 conference. And Kenny from Millicent, one of my portfolio companies, he was wearing a hat that said RWA on it, but the script of the RWA or the font of the RWA was a very recognizable, and I'm holding the hat up to all our listeners out there, to Philipp and Timo right now, because they're very well aware of it, that it is the same font used for NWA, which is one of my favorite rap groups from the 1980s and 1990s. And so I saw Kenny wearing this hat. I'm like, dude, where did you get that? And he pointed over to Katie. And then Timo kind of appeared in the background there wearing the same hat. And I'm like, I need one of those. Kenny's like, go talk to Katie. I tried to get into a conversation with her. I saw her talking to somebody else. I waited my turn politely. And then I said, Katie, I am a rap child from the 1980s. Hip hop, loved it. I also have a podcast. Can we do some sort of trade here? And she just smiled. She's like, I know what you want. She grabbed me a hat, the last hat, and she gave it to me. And I was wearing it the rest of the time that night and then at the conference the next day. So, and Timo, that's when you and I got to briefly meet as well.
I'm from the same kind of music base, if you will. And so one of my educational journeys was with my kids to Los Angeles when we moved to the US. We were like listening to Straight Outta Compton, driving into LA, because that's what you do when you're trying to get your kids to understand the environment that they're in, right? And yeah, with some unfortunate lyrics, but so be it.
We're fans of Katie, and Katie's brilliant in that sense. She runs marketing and biz dev for us. But I think it's fair to say that the NWA hat is sort of a Trojan horse to get the rebels within the older generation within fintech excited, that are basically down with, with rap culture, but are still like coming from sort of the somewhat establishment crossing over to this side of the spectrum into crypto. So it's actually a pretty picture perfect way to look at it. And we get a lot of comments and fist bumps at conferences wearing those hats.
And finally, if one of your fantastic past guests, shout out to Amor Sexton, listens to a recent episode of your podcast and offers to introduce you to one of the founding members of a legendary rap group like NWA, take that intro. Like, who gets to get all fired up about some 1980s counterculture nostalgia through an ingenious crypto merch campaign and then interview someone directly responsible for the source of that nostalgia a month later? I'm a big believer in noting coincidences and following them through to some sort of unexpected outcome. And my interview with one of NWA's founding members, Arabian Prince, is definitely way up there at the top of my interviewing, podcasting, storytelling journey. So we'll end this look back episode with none other than Arabian Prince from NWA, and this segment from episode 283, where Arabian talks to the exact point of inspiration that pushed the Swarm team to create the RWA cap to begin with. When you think about what you've built over the course of your career and knowing that you've built a great network of relationships around this, how do you leverage your network and your partners in order to execute on your vision here?
Yeah. So, one thing that I even tell young kids, learn how to play golf, because I make so many connections on the golf course.
That's
right?
great.
I'm a pretty much near scratch golfer and play a lot of tournament golf. But I've made so many connections with so many business people on the golf course that have helped in my vision and helped to push things forward. Another good way that it makes it easier for me is coming from a rap group like NWA. If you think about it, most of the people that are our age or my age, they grew up on me, right? So, and they run most of the companies now. So it's kind of like the guys that grew up on my music run most of the tech companies. And I think it was my buddy Egyptian Lover who's talking about how he was at a Clipper game, and Ballmer, who owns the Clippers and one of the Microsoft, knows who he is because he grew up on our music.
Yep.
So it makes it easier for us to have the meetings, to do the things that we want to do to give back. And for them to see us want to give back, it makes them want to do so as well.
Definitely. No, that helps. It's a nostalgia, like I said at the beginning, and people remembering, back in the day, I had my old Ford LTD and with a big back deck, and I put my own speakers in that and hooked up an amp and, playing Public Enemy and bouncing that around the place. It was a lot of fun. So, way back in the day. That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to all of our past guests for joining me for the original episodes, for all that they do for the startup community as well. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for all the links to each episode that we featured with all the detail on each guest. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps others to find the show. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to work with on your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early-stage startup investor in the next version of the internet, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!